Hi, I'm Tony Northrup, and for my Lightroom video training series, I'm going to cover the new Panorama feature, a feature that's new in Lightroom 6 and Lightroom CC. When you shoot a panorama, you want to take multiple pictures of a single scene. So instead of zooming back and capturing the entire scene with one photo, you'll zoom in tight and snap just a part of the scene, and then move over about 2/3, overlap each picture by about 1/3, and snap more pictures of the same scene. Lightroom can then stitch them back together, making a high quality, high megapixel image. For an example of how to create and actually capture the panorama, check chapter 2 of my book, Stunning Digital Photography. For now, let's jump into Lightroom and we'll show you what the pictures look like when they're actually captured. So recently I was in Copenhagen and took these 3 pictures of Tivoli in the gardens, and this building is very cool, but I could not step back far enough to capture the entire building in one photo. So I took a picture of the left side, the middle, and the right side. We can combine these really easily. First, I'm going to hold down the Shift key here and select all 3 pictures. Then I'll right-click them, select Photo Merge, and then select Panorama. You see, you can also press Control-M. Now Lightroom's going to read in these actual raw files. It can work with JPEG or RAW files, but it can work with RAW files, and when it outputs it, it will still have a RAW file. It'll be a DNG digital negative file. So Lightroom has stitched all these 3 images together, and it looks pretty good. You can see you don't have a lot of options here. You have the auto crop option, which just crops it down, basically gets rid of all the white spots up here. And then you have the projection type. These are just different ways that Lightroom imagines how you're looking at the scene. So with the spherical projection type, it pretends you're kind of inside a globe and it's painting the inside of that sphere. That's perfect if you do an actual 360-degree panorama. With the perspective projection, it starts with the middle image and then stacks the other images out to either side. And with the cylindrical projection, it's going to look pretty differently sometimes, and other times you won't notice at all, but instead it kind of puts you in the middle of a cylinder rather than a sphere. And you don't necessarily need to understand all of that. All you really need to understand is click on those 3 buttons and pick the one that just looks the most natural to you, the one that really best represents the scene and how you remembered it. So you can see here when I use the cylindrical projection, these walls end up a little curved. And when I use the perspective projection, they're nice and straight, which is actually much more accurate. If I turn on the auto crop here, it does a pretty good job. So I think these are the settings that I'm actually going to go for. I'll click Merge now. So up here, you can see that it's made a new job and it's working in the background. I can go back and work on something else while it's working, because it can indeed take a little bit. Or I can just sit here and wait for it. If you do move on and you want to find your panorama later, the easiest way to do that is to create a text filter. Just hit text here and then search for -pano. And you can see it hasn't yet completed, but when it does complete, it's going to pop right up. Lightroom renames the new file using the previous individual file, and then adding -pano to the end of the file name. It's always going to be a DNG file too. So let's turn that text filter back on, and now we can find our image here. Now if you want, you can go back and uncrop it, even if you had it automatically crop. And there are a few reasons you might want to do this. You might want to uncrop it if, for example, it cropped out an important part of the picture, like this tower in the background. With it uncropped, I can now bring it into Photoshop and actually clone in more sky and kind of cover up that hole that's missing. Now, unfortunately, you cannot do that in Lightroom. You could, in theory, use the spot removal tool and fill it in, but Lightroom simply won't allow you to paint over the edges of the picture like that. So I'll undo the crop and bring it back down. Now you'll see that we can adjust the exposure and any other adjustment to the picture as if it were a single RAW file. That's just great. I have access to all of the original shadow detail that were in the original pictures. So let's pop back into the grid view and take a look at a little more complex panorama. Here I have this castle that I photographed in Toledo, Spain. And you can see I actually did this panorama using 3 separate rows of pictures. You'll see this one in the book itself. But these 5 pictures make up the first middle row. And then these 5 pictures make up the top row. And the 4 pictures down here make up the bottom row. So I'm going to click the first one and then shift click the last one and repeat that process. Photo merge, panorama. If you're making a lot of panoramas and you want to make the whole thing go much faster, hold down Control and Shift at the same time and then press M. And that will cause Lightroom to import the pictures and process them automatically, accepting the default settings. So it'll bypass this dialog completely. And that can be really useful if you're the type who shoots a lot of panoramas. Now I just wish Lightroom would add in a feature that automatically detected a panorama that you'd shot and automatically combine them. If you do use the auto merge feature, notice that you can't go back and change the projection type manually, and the projection type is important enough that you pretty much need to pull up that dialog every time. So once again, my only options really are the auto crop and the projection type. And as before, I'm simply going to view each of these and determine which one looks most natural to me. For me, I think I'm happiest with the perspective correction, and the auto crop looks pretty good. So I'll click the merge. Once again, it's working up here, and I just have to wait for it to actually perform the merge. So once it's merged, you can move on to the editing, and it works basically like any other RAW file. As you can see, it's combined all the pictures for me. This took a while because there were 24 megapixel files and like 14 different images. So it had a pretty big job to do, and it did take a while. I'll do the usual, lower the blacks a little bit to increase the contrast. But as I zoom in, you can see I just have unheard of amounts of detail here. If we look at the actual metadata for the file, we can see the resolution is 18,000 by 8,000. So let's multiply those real quickly. That's a 164 megapixel image out of 24 megapixel images. So as you can see, you can capture just a ton more detail. It's also really going to hammer your computer. You can see, even just zooming in to see the individual pixels, this particular computer, which is powerful, is still turning on it. It's still waiting. There, it finally popped up. So now I can finally browse around. But to zoom back and then zoom in and be able to see this much detail is pretty incredible. And panoramas are the single best way to truly capture a scene. So I hope you found this video helpful. Please also refer to the photo merge chapter in the Lightroom 6 book for detailed information and reference. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to send me an email at tony@northrup.org. Thanks.